Hey there, you're looking kind of cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out all my other socials. Enjoy. John paced back and forth, his eyes darting to the clock every few seconds. Today was the day that would change everything. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for the small paper bag on the kitchen counter, withdrawing the vials and syringes inside. "You can do this," he whispered to himself, taking a deep breath. Months of research, therapy sessions, and agonizing conversations had led to this moment. John had known for years that he was meant to be Josephine, but only now was he taking the first tangible step towards becoming her. With meticulous care, he prepared the injection of estrogen, his heart pounding. The needle hovered above his thigh as doubt crept in. Was he really ready for this? What if his family was right, and this was just a phase? But then he thought of all the nights spent crying in front of the mirror, hating the reflection staring back at him. No, this wasn't a phase. This was who he truly was. The sharp pinch of the needle-piercing skin made John wince, but as he depressed the plunger, a sense of rightness washed over him. It was done. The first dose of many that would reshape his body into the form it should have been all along. Carefully disposing of the needle, John grabbed the worn leather journal from his nightstand. On the first blank page, he wrote the date and day 1, HRT started. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one he intended to document meticulously. The first few weeks passed in a blur of anticipation and anxiety. John scrutinized himself in the mirror constantly, searching for any hint of change. His skin seemed a little softer, but was that just his imagination? The lack of immediate, dramatic transformation was both a relief and a disappointment. It was at the 1-month mark that John noticed the first undeniable change. As he got out of the shower, he realized his chest felt tender and slightly swollen. A mix of excitement and trepidation flooded through him as he hurriedly threw on a shirt, not quite ready to confront the physical manifestation of his transition. That night, he poured his feelings into his journal. 1 month on HRT, my chest is definitely changing. It's scary and amazing at the same time. I can't believe it's really happening. Mom called today, asked if I was still on those dangerous drugs. I didn't know what to say. How can I make them understand this isn't dangerous? It's saving me? As the weeks turned into months, the changes became more pronounced. John's facial features softened. His skin became smoother, and the once coarse hair on his body grew finer and slower. Each shift, no matter how small, was carefully noted in the journal that had become his confidant. 3 months in, John made another monumental decision. Staring at his reflection, he no longer saw John looking back at him. It was time to embrace his true identity fully. "My name is Josephine," she practiced saying aloud, her voice cracking with emotion. It felt right, like slipping on a perfectly tailored glove. From that day forward, John ceased to exist, and Josephine began to blossom. The journey wasn't without its challenges. Josephine's family remained distant, their silence a constant ache in her heart. She longed for their acceptance, for them to see the joy and peace that transitioning had brought her. But for now, she had to be content with the support of a few close friends who had stood by her side. At the 6-month mark, Josephine couldn't help but marvel at her reflection. The changes were undeniable now. Her face had a softer, more feminine appearance, with subtle shifts in the distribution of fat, giving her cheeks a gentle roundness. Her body was changing too. Muscles that had once been well-defined were softening, and her hips seemed slightly fuller. But it wasn't just the physical changes that amazed her. Josephine found herself more in tune with her emotions, experiencing them with a depth and nuance she had never known before. She cried more easily, both from joy and sorrow, and found a new appreciation for the complexity of her feelings. 6 months on HRT, she wrote in her journal. Sometimes I catch a glimpse of myself and can't believe it's really me. I feel more myself than I ever have, even as my body becomes something new. Started voice training last week. It's harder than I thought, but I'm determined. Every day, in every way, I'm becoming more Josephine. As summer faded into autumn, Josephine's transformation continued. Her hair, once short and utilitarian, now fell in soft waves past her shoulders. She experimented with makeup, learning through trial and error how to accentuate her features. Each small victory, mastering winged eyeliner, finding the perfect shade of lipstick, felt like a step closer to fully realizing her true self. But the journey wasn't without its setbacks. One crisp October morning, Josephine decided to visit her favorite coffee shop, feeling confident in a new floral dress and carefully applied makeup. As she waited in line, she overheard a group of men snickering and making crude comments. Their words cut deep, reminding her of the long road still ahead. Fighting back tears, Josephine fled the shop, her untouched latte left behind on the counter. She spent the rest of the day curled up in bed, questioning everything. Was she fooling herself? Would she ever truly be accepted as a woman? It was in these dark moments that her journal became a lifeline. Flipping through the pages, she saw the incredible progress she had made. The physical changes were documented in detail, but it was the emotional growth that stood out. The increasing confidence, the moments of pure joy at finally feeling comfortable in her own skin. These were the real triumphs. Josephine wrote a new entry, her hand steady despite the lingering hurt. Today was hard. Sometimes I forget how cruel the world can be, but I am not going back. I am Josephine, and I am becoming more myself every day. Their ignorance doesn't change who I am. As the 1-year mark approached, Josephine found herself filled with a mix of excitement and apprehension. She had come so far, but the strained relationship with her family cast a shadow over her achievements. They had barely spoken in months, each attempted conversation ending in frustration and tears. Josephine decided to mark the anniversary of starting HRT by visiting her parents. She chose her outfit carefully, a modest sweater and jeans that highlighted her now feminine figure without being overstated. Her hair was swept into a simple ponytail, and her makeup was subtle but flawless. Heart-pounding, she knocked on the familiar front door. Long moments passed before it swung open, revealing her mother's shocked face. "Can I help you?" her mother asked, confusion evident in her voice. Josephine's breath caught in her throat. Her own mother didn't recognize her. A year of hormone therapy had transformed her so completely that she was a stranger in her childhood home. "Mom," Josephine said softly, her voice higher and smoother than it had been a year ago. "It's me. It's Josephine." Her mother's eyes widened in disbelief, a hand flying to her mouth. "John?" she whispered, using the name Josephine had left behind. "Not anymore, Mom. I'm Josephine now. I hoped we could talk." For a moment, Josephine thought her mother might slam the door in her face. But then, slowly, she stepped aside. "Come in," she said, her voice tight with emotion. "Your father should be here for this." The next few hours were a roller coaster of emotions. There were tears, raised voices, and long silences heavy with unspoken feelings. Josephine showed them her journal, letting them see the physical and emotional journey she had undertaken. She explained the joy she felt at finally being true to herself, the peace that came with aligning her outer appearance with her inner identity. Her parents listened, sometimes nodding, sometimes shaking their heads in confusion. It wasn't instant acceptance. Years of misunderstanding and hurt couldn't be erased in a single afternoon, but it was a start. As Josephine prepared to leave, her mother hugged her awkwardly but sincerely. "I can't pretend to understand everything," her mother said softly, "but I can see how much happier you are. We'll try. Okay?" Josephine nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "That's all I ask," she whispered. That night, curled up in her apartment, Josephine made her final entry in the journal that had chronicled her first year of transition. 1 year on HRT, I barely recognized the person I was 365 days ago. My body has changed in ways I once only dreamed of. Softer skin, curves in places that were once angular, a face in the mirror that finally feels like me. But the real change is inside. I am Josephine, fully and completely. The road ahead is still long, but I'm no longer walking it alone. Today, my parents really saw me for the first time. It's a small step, but it's in the right direction. Whatever challenges tomorrow brings, I am ready to face them as my true self. Josephine closed the journal, running her fingers over the worn cover. It had been her constant companion through the trials and triumphs of the past year. Now, it was time to start a new volume, one that would chronicle the adventures of Josephine as she continued to grow, learn, and embrace her authentic self. As she drifted off to sleep, Josephine felt a sense of peace she had never known before. The journey of the past year had been difficult, but it had led her to this moment, a moment where she was finally, truly herself. Whatever the future held, she would face it as Josephine, proud and unafraid. The next morning, Josephine woke with a renewed sense of purpose. The visit to her parents, while emotionally draining, had given her hope for the future. She decided to channel this energy into taking the next steps in her transition. Her first stop was the local courthouse. After months of paperwork and legal hurdles, she was finally able to officially change her name and gender marker on her identification documents. As the clerk handed her the updated papers, Josephine felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Josephine wasn't just a name she had chosen for herself anymore. It was her legal identity. Clutching the documents to her chest, she stepped out into the sunlight, feeling as though she could conquer the world. But reality had a way of tempering even the highest spirits. As she walked down the street, she noticed a group of her old college friends across the road. For a moment, she considered calling out to them, but hesitation held her back. How would they react to her transformation? Would they accept Josephine as readily as they had accepted John? Before she could make a decision, the group turned a corner and disappeared from view. Josephine sighed, realizing that coming out to old friends and acquaintances was yet another challenge she would have to face. Determined not to let this moment dampen her spirits, Josephine decided to treat herself to a shopping trip. Her body had changed significantly over the past year, and much of her old wardrobe no longer fit properly. As she browsed through racks of colorful dresses and blouses, she marveled at how natural it felt to shop in the women's section. A friendly sales associate approached, offering assistance. Looking for anything in particular, miss?" she asked with a warm smile. The casual use of "miss" sent a thrill through Josephine. It was a small thing, but it meant the world to her. "Just browsing," she replied, her voice soft and feminine. "But I could use some help finding the right sizes. I'm still learning what works for my body." The associate was more than happy to help, and soon Josephine found herself in a fitting room surrounded by a selection of clothes. As she tried on each item, she couldn't help but marvel at her reflection. The hormones had redistributed her body fat, giving her a softer, more feminine silhouette. Her waist was more defined, her hips slightly wider. It wasn't a dramatic change, but it was enough to make her feel more at home in her own skin. After making her purchases, Josephine decided to stop by a nearby cafe for lunch. As she settled into a corner table with her salad, she overheard a conversation from the next table over. "Did you see that woman who just came in?" one voice whispered. "I think she might be transgender." Josephine froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. Were they talking about her? Had she done something to give herself away? "Really?" another voice replied. "I wouldn't have guessed. She looks so natural." The first voice hummed in agreement. "It's amazing what they can do these days. Good for her, living her truth." Josephine let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The conversation wasn't malicious. If anything, it was supportive. But it was a stark reminder that no matter how far she had come, there would always be people who saw her as different. As she finished her meal, Josephine pondered this reality. Yes, she was different. Her journey was not one that everyone undertook, but different didn't mean less than. If anything, her experiences had made her stronger, more empathetic, more authentically herself. That evening, as she hung up her new clothes and prepared for bed, Josephine found herself reflecting on the day's events. The legal name change, the shopping trip, the overheard conversation, each moment was a step forward in her journey. She was no longer just surviving, hiding who she truly was. She was living, embracing every aspect of her identity. She picked up her phone, hesitating for a moment before dialing a number she knew by heart. After a few rings, her mother's voice answered. "Hello?" "Hi, Mom," Josephine said, her voice steady. "I just wanted to call and say goodnight, and thank you for trying. It means more than you know." There was a pause on the other end of the line, then her mother's voice, softer than before. "Good night, Josephine. Sleep well." As she ended the call, Josephine felt a warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress, and progress, no matter how small, was worth celebrating. The next few months brought new challenges and triumphs. Josephine continued her voice training, working tirelessly to develop a speaking voice that matched her identity. It was frustrating at times. Hours of practice could be undone by a moment of laughter or a sneeze that came out in her old, deeper register. But slowly, steadily, she made progress. She also began the process of coming out to more people in her life. Some reactions were positive, old friends who embraced her with open arms, coworkers who simply nodded and updated their contact information without fuss. Others were more difficult. She lost touch with a few people who couldn't accept her transition, and there were awkward moments of misgendering and dead naming that left her feeling raw and exposed. But through it all, Josephine held onto the strength she had developed over the past year. She knew who she was, and she refused to let anyone else's discomfort or misunderstanding shake that certainty. As summer approached, Josephine faced one of her biggest challenges yet. Her younger sister was getting married, and she had been invited to be a bridesmaid. It was an honor that filled her with both joy and trepidation. On one hand, it was a clear sign of acceptance from her sister. On the other, it meant facing extended family members who hadn't seen her since her transition. The day of the wedding dawned bright and clear. Josephine arrived at the venue early, her bridesmaid dress carefully packed in a garment bag. As she entered the bridal suite, she was greeted by a chorus of excited squeals from the other bridesmaids. "Josephine!" her sister cried, rushing over to envelop her in a hug. "I'm so glad you're here. You look amazing." The next few hours were a whirlwind of hairstyling, makeup application, and last-minute adjustments to dresses. Josephine found herself swept up in the excitement, laughing and chatting with the other women, as if she had always been one of them. It wasn't until she stepped out into the garden where the ceremony was to take place that reality set in. She could see the curious glances, hear the whispered conversations, but she held her head high, focusing on the joy of the day rather than the discomfort of being scrutinized. As she took her place at the altar, Josephine caught sight of her parents in the front row. Her father's expression was unreadable, but her mother offered a small, encouraging smile. It was enough to bolster Josephine's confidence as the ceremony began. The reception that followed was a mix of wonderful and awkward moments. Some relatives welcomed her warmly, while others kept their distance. An elderly aunt cornered her by the punch bowl, peppering her with intrusive questions about her transition. But for every uncomfortable interaction, there was a moment of pure acceptance, like when her young nephew ran up to her on the dance floor, grabbed her hand, and declared, "Aunt Josephine, you're the prettiest bridesmaid." As the night wore on, Josephine found herself sitting at a table with her parents. There was a moment of awkward silence before her father cleared his throat. "You look beautiful, Josephine," he said, his voice gruff but sincere. "Hi. I'm sorry it's taken me so long to see that." Tears welled up in Josephine's eyes as she reached out to squeeze her father's hand. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered. "That means everything to me." It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There were still hurdles to overcome, misconceptions to correct, and a lifetime of adjusting to her new reality. But as Josephine looked around at her family, the ones who had struggled but ultimately accepted her, and the ones who had stood by her side from the beginning, she knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The journey of the past year and a half had been challenging, but it had led her to this moment. Josephine was no longer hiding, no longer pretending to be someone she wasn't. She was herself, wholly, authentically, and unapologetically, and that, she realized, was the greatest gift of all. As the wedding reception wound down, Josephine found herself on the balcony of the venue, gazing out at the star-studded sky. The sounds of laughter and music drifted from inside, but she savored this moment of quiet reflection. A gentle hand on her shoulder made her turn. It was her sister, the bride, radiant in her wedding gown. "Hey, you," her sister said softly. "Everything okay out here?" Josephine nodded, a smile playing on her lips. "Just taking it all in. It's been quite a day." Her sister leaned against the railing beside her. "I'm so glad you were here, Josephine. I couldn't have imagined this day without you by my side." "Even with all the drama I brought along?" Josephine asked, only half joking. Her sister shook her head firmly. "You didn't bring drama? You brought yourself, your true self. And that's all I ever wanted for you." Josephine felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. "When did you get so wise, little sis?" "Oh, I've always been the smart one," her sister teased, bumping Josephine's shoulder playfully. Then, more seriously, "I'm proud of you, you know. It takes incredible strength to be who you are in a world that doesn't always understand." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the cool night air rustling their dresses. "So," her sister said eventually, a mischievous glint in her eye, "I saw you chatting with my friend Mark earlier. He's single, you know." Josephine felt a blush creep up her cheeks. "Oh, stop it. I'm not ready for that yet." "Why not? You're a beautiful, confident woman. Any guy would be lucky to have you." The words, "beautiful, confident woman," sent a thrill through Josephine. There was a time not so long ago when she never thought she'd hear those words applied to her. "Maybe someday," Josephine conceded. "For now, I'm still getting used to being me." Her sister nodded, understanding. "Fair enough. But when you're ready, promise me you won't sell yourself short. You deserve all the happiness in the world, Josephine." As they hugged and her sister returned to the party, Josephine turned back to the stars. Her sister's words echoed in her mind. She did deserve happiness, and for the first time in her life, she truly believed she could achieve it. The weeks following the wedding were a whirlwind of activity. Encouraged by the positive experience, Josephine decided it was time to take more steps forward in her life. She updated her resume, removing her dead name and proudly listing her achievements under Josephine. It was a small change, but it felt monumental. She also decided to join a support group for transgender individuals in her area. While she had made incredible progress on her own, she realized there was value in connecting with others who understood her unique experiences. At her first meeting, Josephine was surprised by the diversity of the group. There were people of all ages, at various stages of their transitions. Some had known they were trans since childhood, while others had only recently come to terms with their identity. As they shared their stories, Josephine felt a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. One evening, after a particularly emotional group session, Josephine found herself walking home with another member of the group, a trans man named Michael. "It's funny," Michael said as they strolled through the park. "I've been on T for 3 years now, and sometimes I still feel like I'm just starting out." Josephine nodded in understanding. "I know what you mean. Every day brings something new, doesn't it?" "Exactly," Michael agreed. "But you know what? I wouldn't trade it for anything. Being true to myself, it's everything." As they parted ways, Josephine felt a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't alone in this journey. There was a whole community of people who understood, who had walked similar paths. The next day, Josephine made a bold decision. She had been working from home for the past year, partly to avoid the complications of transitioning in a workplace environment. But now she felt ready to rejoin the world fully. She applied for a new job, one that aligned more closely with her passions. When she was called in for an interview, she spent hours preparing, not just for the standard questions about her qualifications, but for the possibility of discussing her transition. The day of the interview arrived, and Josephine dressed in a smart blazer and skirt, her makeup understated but flawless. As she sat across from the interviewer, she felt a calm confidence she had never experienced in job interviews before. "So, Josephine," the interviewer said, glancing at her resume, "there's a gap in your employment history. Can you tell me about that?" Taking a deep breath, Josephine decided to be honest. "Of course. During that time, I was going through a significant personal transition. I'm a transgender woman, and that period marks the beginning of my journey to live authentically as myself." She held her breath, waiting for the interviewer's reaction. To her surprise, the woman simply nodded and made a note. "Thank you for sharing that, Josephine. It must have taken a lot of courage. Now, tell me about your experience with project management." The rest of the interview flew by, and Josephine left feeling exhilarated. She had been open about who she was, and it hadn't derailed the conversation. If anything, it had allowed her to showcase her resilience and adaptability. A week later, she received the call she had been hoping for. She got the job. As she prepared for her first day at the new office, Josephine reflected on how far she had come. A year and a half ago, she had been terrified of the changes ahead, unsure if she would ever truly feel comfortable in her own skin. Now she was stepping into a new chapter of her life, confident in who she was and excited for what the future held. She picked up her phone and dialed her parents' number. Her mother answered on the second ring. "Mom, I have some news," Josephine said, unable to keep the excitement from her voice. "I got a new job, a really good one." Her mother's voice was warm with pride. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Your father and I are so proud of you." The casual use of sweetheart, a term of endearment her mother had rarely used before, brought tears to Josephine's eyes. "Thanks, Mom. I couldn't have done it without your support." As she ended the call, Josephine caught sight of herself in the mirror. The woman looking back at her was confident, happy, and whole. She was Josephine in every way that mattered. Josephine hung up the phone, her heart still fluttering from her mother's words. "Sweetheart." That single word, so simple yet so loaded with acceptance, echoed in her mind as she stood in her apartment, the late afternoon sunlight streaming through the window. She felt buoyant, as if the weight of the past year and a half had finally lifted entirely. A new job, a fresh start, and now this small but monumental step forward with her family. It was more than she had dared to hope for in those early, uncertain days of her transition. She glanced at the shopping bags still sitting on her couch, the ones she'd brought home from her celebratory spree after changing her legal documents. The clothes inside had been calling to her ever since, but she'd been saving them for a moment just like this, one where she felt truly victorious, truly herself. Tonight, she decided, was the night to celebrate. Not just the job or her parents' tentative embrace, but Josephine herself, the woman she had fought so hard to become. She practically skipped to the couch, her bare feet padding softly against the hardwood floor, and began unpacking the bags with the reverence of someone unveiling a treasure. Thanks for watching. The rest won't be viewable on YouTube, so check out Patreon if you want more. I hope you have a wonderful day, my cutie.